Okay, let's get started tonight. It's my pleasure to introduce Brian Lynch, who's a consultant with Eli Lilly, and his area is in threat intelligence. He's part of a team there that works on that. He's been with the company for 16 years, and he's held various roles within security, including manufacturing security, vulnerability management, threat management, and most recently threat intelligence, where he works today. He has a bachelor's degree in management information systems and a master's in information communication sciences. And he is certified in a number of different ways, and he's going to share his experiences with us and Eli Lilly on threat intelligence.
All right. Thank you. I assume, is this on? Projecting?
You should be good.
All right. Well, thanks for having me, guys. As he said, he kind of did my intro for me. From the slides, we're going to talk through. This is a talk I gave at the NHISAC, which stands for National Healthcare ISAC, back in November, so just a couple months ago. Tried to modify it a little bit, so I'll be ad-libbing a little in the middle of this. But for the most part, what I hope you're going to get out of here, we'll get to agenda slide in a minute, but is that you'll walk away not only understanding a little bit about what threat intelligence is, but kind of seeing how it's implemented in a company. So, we could go to Google and look up different things about threat intelligence, but hopefully you'll walk away with what it kind of looks like being implemented at a large company. So that being said, he introduced me a little bit. He already mentioned I'm 16 years at Lilly. My husband, I'm married for 15 years. I got an 11-year-old son. He's a baseball coach. Love to exercise and work out, and love the Lord for 15 years, and I'm a high school youth group leader, so I'm happy to be on campus. So I'm going to go visit a few of my students that have come up here to be at school at Purdue. So, and then ways to get a hold of me, the best way is definitely my email. I have the Twitter handle. I don't use it nearly as often as I should, and it could look kind of conceited to be risk master in the field of information security, but I can assure you that what that really is around the board game risk, if you guys have heard that. And me and my family play that a lot, and they get beat a lot, so that's where that comes from. So I mentioned the agenda. We're just going to kind of go through the creation of our TI team around people, process, technology, what the future looks like, and hopefully leave plenty of time for questions and answers. You'll see the Wild E Coyote and the Roadrunner up there, and then also the threat intelligence lifecycle in there. And so that is, I thought this was pretty applicable because if you know the Roadrunner or know the Coyote, he's always trying to get the Roadrunner. Really never ever catches him. He's always having to retool, replan, and keep trying to execute, right? And so threat intelligence is not a lot different. It's never ending, right? There's always changes in adversaries and whatnot. So that's the theme of the slides. And then, as always, when I do these views are my own and not necessarily of my company. And this was, again, the NHISAC's audience, but not necessarily a super technical presentation. And that's where the Coyote leaving the screen was for all the super technical people to leave so they wouldn't pepper me with a bunch of questions and make me feel stupid. So, so jumping into it. Before I talk about threat intelligence, I'll tell you where I came from and what Lilly looked like before we did that. Or actually, I jumped ahead. I skipped the first bullet of my slide. This is one I added, so sorry. So threat intelligence. What is threat intelligence? I thought I would do a definition of that. And so what we believe that to be is analyzed information about hostile intent, capability, and opportunity of an adversary. So it's very much focused on the human and not focused on vulnerabilities. So we have a vulnerability management department too, and a lot of times threat intelligence and vulnerability management can get mixed up. And really, vulnerabilities are a way that adversaries can use and exploit threats, but vulnerabilities by themselves are not threats. So that's kind of what we deem to be threat intelligence. And so now we'll go into, so prior to having a threat intelligence program at Lilly, we had what we would call our incident response team, our SOC, Security Operations Center, and as a part of that, there was a threat management function, and myself and one other colleague who's now on the threat intelligence team, we were that function, and we had several different roles in there. We were kind of the in-between between our tier one folks that were eyes on glass looking at incidents, and they would send stuff to us they thought were incidents, but we would make sure we really thought they were, kind of weed out the false positives before we push them up. We also had to manage the vendor, and we had to do SLAs and metrics and different things like that. And so I tell you all that to say we were supposed to do threat intelligence in that role. It was one of our titles, but a lot of times at big companies, you have a whole bunch of stuff to do, and you just got to prioritize. And so threat intelligence just kept getting prioritized to the bottom, and we just didn't do it. So we got to the point where we really need a dedicated team, and so that's around the third piece on my slides here, which is why do you need a dedicated team? And so these are some of the reasons. Very much threat intelligence is external visibility, what's going on outside of your company trying to come in, what's attacking your company, what's attacking your sector like pharma or healthcare. We wanted to understand the threat better. What threats are there to us? We didn't really understand who might be interested in attacking us. We wanted to get to an intelligence-driven model for security and wanted threat intelligence to play a role into that. And a couple of the other bullet points on there around IOCs and understanding APTs, advanced persistent threats, and things like that. So I mentioned that the threat management's goal was to really weed out false positives, really, and make sure we put good things up there. So kind of the primary, if I had to sum it up, the primary purpose of TI is we're trying to inform our business of threats and risks around our business. So that's kind of how I would sum up all those bullet points. And then this is where I've thrown in a few extra things. Yeah, go ahead.
I do have a question. Given that there's always vulnerability. Use your microphone, please, if you can. I am. Given that there's always vulnerabilities, do your efforts allow you to say, given the threats, these are the vulnerabilities we should take care of first?
Absolutely, yes. Great question. That is very much one of the things. So it's back to that risk-driven, intelligence-driven program. So for the vulnerability side, if we find a very critical threat out there that's exploiting a vulnerability to make that threat be realized, yes, our vulnerability team can add that to, they have a kind of a top 10 scanning list, and they can add that to their list. Feel free.
So when you look at the Verizon threat reports,
Can you please use your microphone?
okay, the light's on. So when you use your threat intelligence, does it help you shorten the time to discovery? That sometimes you see, like in Verizon reports, sometimes they don't find a threat until,
That is a much tougher question, also a good one. Right now, I would say, and so some of my Lilly colleagues are here in the corner, and they're going to introduce themselves towards the end or at the end. But right now, we don't do a super great job of metrics tracking, and so dwell time and reduce all those different things. It would be hard for us to say definitively that our program's doing that. I would like to say we are. We just have a hard time quantifying it right now, I think would be a fair answer to that. Let's see. So a couple things I wanted to throw in here on this, what I think makes threat intelligence valuable to a company. And to me, it's a lot like goal setting. You probably heard goal setting, and they need to be realistic, and they need to be timely and whatnot. And so what I found, and what I believe is they need to be accurate and timely and relevant, tailored to your audience, to our organization, to our industry. Predictive. That's a big part of threat intelligence. We get asked a lot, right? How does this threat affect us? Where could it affect us? Why would they go use this threat? And so predictive and then actionable. So those are some of the things I think are valuable threat intelligence characteristics. And then an important thing for a threat intelligence program to do is to show value. And sometimes that's hard because I think of threat intelligence kind of like insurance, right? And so it's kind of timely because I just got my year-end report from my credit card statement where I put a lot of my stuff, and I saw that I spent $3,300 on insurance this year, which was like, wow. Having a hard time finding the value in that. But that's where threat intel comes in there too, is that we got to be able to find that, show that value. Some of that's in the metrics that I said we're going to get to. So 4 things I put down that I think show value of a threat intel program, which is to produce intel products for a wide variety of people, including your executives. Using your intel to drive your project portfolio, so help prioritize which projects are more important than others. So you mentioned vulnerabilities, but you can also do projects, right? What tool needs to be implemented more quickly because of the threats we're seeing. I had to decrease dwell time metrics and other metrics to your question, and then cost avoidance. And so that one's huge because it's hard to communicate that, but for us, so take NotPetya, for instance, and you guys have probably read when Merck got hit with that, right? They're a fellow pharmaceutical company with us, and I think they've reported somewhere in the neighborhood of $400 million loss, right? And then also, I cannot ever say their name right, so I'll just say the shipping company that got hit as well. They were like $350 million lost. And so being able to communicate that, hey, that was an attack very much that could have hit us, and it didn't through some of our efforts, our tools. So that's how we can demonstrate some value out of TI and security as a whole, really. So moving on, so we're going to talk a little bit on this slide about how we got to a TI program, and then we're going to talk about people, process, technology. And so again, I would just highlight, you guys have probably heard through undergrad and whatnot, you know, when you get into a company, management sponsorship is key, right? You got to have sponsorship to really drive anything across the company. And so creating a TI program was no different. And so our CISO saw the value with some of the stuff I already talked about. We needed a TI program. She didn't really have the expertise to build it, and we didn't really have it inside. So what we did is we went out and we bought it. We hired a pretty high-level person from another company that reported directly to our CISO, who had threat intelligence experience and came in with that mindset to build it. And then, of course, we had to show that value pretty fast, right? So we started producing intel reports was what we could do right away to start showing that value, to keep that management sponsorship, to kind of to grow the team. And then I guess I would just say what we did, because it could be hard to get to a point where you're ever like, we're ready for threat intelligence, we're 100% ready. So we went at it at risk, is what we like to call it, and we started doing threat intelligence before even having a team ready, really. So we lifted and shifted. I mentioned myself and another colleague that was in threat management. We just basically moved over and started doing threat intelligence. And we're going to talk about that more, I think, on the next slide. So the build out of the team and the people piece. So the coyote here, he's looking a little dazed and confused because and that's pretty much how my colleague and I felt, because you got all this stuff. You got executive briefs, and you got attacker TTPs and sharing of threat intelligence and all these different things coming at you. How are you going to hunt? And all these things that make up TI. And you got two Lilly people that got a lot of experience at Lilly and kind of know our environment, but they don't know how to do TI. So what we did, and I think it was a great resource mix for us, is that we went out and hired two external people out and brought them in that had TI experience. One of them came from a whole different industry sector than us, so brought a different skew to us, a perspective to us in pharmaceutical. And another guy we got out of the Army, and that's what he did full-time, was threat intelligence from an Army standpoint. And so those two guys coming in was really helpful. And so as you guys can imagine, if we had 4 Lilly people trying to do this, just learn threat intelligence, that would have been much slower. And if we had 4 external people that knew a bunch about threat intelligence but couldn't apply it to the Lilly environment and what systems and tools and procedures we had in place, that would have been a lot harder to put in place. So I think that resource mix was really good. And then other things we're doing around people, not only in threat intelligence but in security altogether, is that we let all of our people go to a training every year. We're a big SANS shop, so SANS training, and so we do a training every year and get certified if we choose in that. We also get to go to a conference or more usually in that, because a lot of times the conferences like NHISAC are pretty cheap, and so they don't really cost too much to go to. We're celebrating a lot of times at Lilly and big companies, you know, certifications kind of go by the wayside, but in security we're really celebrating that and rewarding and recognizing people when they get new certs. And we do several things where we try to get in front of people and share. So kind of like this, we do it internal. We have some quarterly sessions and monthly sessions where we can come and present stuff that we've learned at conferences. So that's some of what we've done around the people side. So we'll move on to the process, and this is a very busy slide, and I'm going to touch on pieces of this throughout this. Got a lot of notes behind the scene here. But over on the left-hand side, it's those same things: threat intelligence feeds and sources and threat hunting and all those things you got to do as a threat analyst. And then everything on the right is all of your outputs, except for the legal privacy partnership. So you got some other factors in your company that you have to weigh in when it comes to doing threat intelligence, and then you got all the rest: who you're going to report to, what kind of reports you're going to do, how you're going to share. So that's kind of walking you through that slide. So when we first started doing this, I mentioned we needed to provide some value. So we started doing reporting, and there's different types of reporting in threat intelligence. So you can have a flash report. So WannaCry and NotPetya were one of those, right? So when those came through, those were very big deals, and we had to start working on those immediately, and we needed to inform our org of what was going on. So those are flash reports, need to get out very quickly. We also have RFIs, requests for informations, reports, and so what those are not urgent requests that people might want to bring into our team, and we can respond to those in due time as it allows, and we get those back out. One of the main products we do is a weekly threat intel report that goes out to our whole security team and a little bit broader audience at this point. And it's basically the TI team taking all the threats over the last week, trying to get to 6 to 10 that are most applicable that we think the company needs to know about, and we send that out with some analysis and whatnot to drive some action and drive some awareness. And then we also do some quarterly and annually reporting. So quarterly we roll up the top threats for the quarter. Annually can also be end of the year, what were our top threats, but also a predictive report, where when we just went through that exercise for 2018 where we were trying to predict with some help of our intelligence and reading what we think the threats are going to be for this year. So that was our reporting stuff. We also have, again, you get something like WannaCry and NotPetya, we didn't really have a process in place for how we're going to come together as a team and work, because as you can imagine that went across many areas. So our security engineering function, our vulnerability management, and our incident response folks, all these people had to come together. We didn't really have a process. So now we have what we call a proactive threat management process, and that's where we come together and threat intelligence comes in and provides what's the threat? What are the actors doing? Is it actively being exploited in the wild, or is it just proof of concept code, or you provide that. Vulnerability management comes in, we'll give updates on how well patched we are on any known vulnerabilities relating to it. IR will come in and talk through any instances we're seeing in our network and what we're doing about it. Yep, question?
I'll speak loudly in case this microphone's not working well. Who makes the call from your threat intelligence in terms of what to patch, and then when you have, for example, your one-year outlook, what to invest going forward?
Yeah, sounds like I can hear him. So who makes the call on what to patch? Was that the question? Sorry, summarize.
Where does the decision-making take place from the threat intelligence report on what vulnerabilities are going to be patched, what new tools might be purchased given threats that are now coming over the ocean or wherever they come from?
Gotcha. Okay. Around vulnerability management, a lot of times if something has to be patched quickly, it'll fall in that PTM process I was just talking about, and that's what that team, as a team, those three areas kind of come together and get to a group decision, and that goes up to our management. Okay. And our management ultimately makes that call and then contacts management over in our infrastructure areas to do the patching. When it comes to our projects, that's still a work in progress, but that's a tie into our risk management function. So they have what we call like a risk registry where all of our different risks are out there, and our projects ideally will all kind of be related to this risk registry, and so that's how projects could be prioritized. And so that's how the call will be made on those. Does that address your question?
I'm going to hold off on a few more questions because I don't want to take all your time.
Okay, no
This
worries.
is great.
Let's see. So I want to talk about our reporting, because this was something I got a lot of feedback on at the NHISAC. And so from a threat intelligence standpoint, when it comes to these flash reports and NotPetya and WannaCry, those were big wins for threat intelligence at Lilly, because what we decided to do as a team is we decided to produce reports quickly, very quickly, in the absence of them needing to be even 80% correct. And so I got a lot of feedback afterwards where people were saying, oh, so you're just pushing out crap, right? And that's not true, right? So we're still trying to do the best we can, but what we don't want to do is be super behind and everybody else in the org already making decisions before they hear from threat intelligence. So Specifically in WannaCry, we produced threat intelligence like 8 hours prior to getting anything from our commercial feed vendors. And in the end, that first report, our first report compared to their first report, was way more accurate. And so that was a big win for us. And that's not slamming commercial feed providers, because they provide a lot of value to us too, but they definitely have to be slower because they need to be more accurate. They got to be more on the accurate side than speed. They have to balance it too. But so that's what we do. We find that very valuable for the org. I think the org enjoys that. And so then you might be asking, if we're not getting our data from threat and feed providers, where do we get it? And so this is where our partnership with NHISAC is super cool. There's a tool called, or a forum called We Secrets. And so it's basically a chat window, really, and all the different members of NHISAC are in there and take NotPetya. So Merck people were out there, and when they figured out how they got attacked, where it came in at, they were out there freely sharing that, and it was super valuable to us. Maybe kept us from being hit with it, because we had similar situations in some areas, and we were able to go find those and close those down or patch them. So that was very helpful. So We Secrets, having a chat window with external people, is super big in intelligence. Yes, sir?
So Congress passed the law, I think it was late 2015, maybe 2016. I think it's 2016, where basically they made it easier for corporate America to share information with the government and vice versa, and made DHS responsible, making sure that the information it received was shared equally and quickly among government agencies. Have you seen that help within the last year at all, in terms of threats?
I would say I haven't seen a difference, no,
Okay.
in that. It's just my opinion. Maybe other people might think differently, but for who we partner with and how we share, I didn't really see any difference in that. So
Okay.
would be my answer to that. Let's see. And then for a big piece on here, so this is around the legal partnership. So I would say that all legal departments are pretty conservative. The legal department at Lilly is probably more conservative than others. We're heavily regulated by FDA, and so we got to be really careful about what we do and what we share. And so, there's meant to be healthy tension between a threat intelligence program and a legal and a law division, right? Because the lawyers are trying to keep us safe from being sued and harm, and threat intelligence is trying to keep us safe from hackers, right? And so we have two different viewpoints, and we got to come together as partnership. It's easier said than done, but what we've decided, what we think has helped with that, is that you have to play offense, right? Because if you're not playing offense, you're playing defense, and when you're on the defensive, you never really get anything through. And so we play offense, and so I was going to share a couple examples of that. The first one's around our threat hunting, right? So threat hunting was very, that made our lawyers very nervous to even talk about threat hunting. So we came up with a plan to go through threat hunting, and I think it was a PowerPoint deck, maybe a PDF, but we created basically a list of things that we were going to do. What are we going to hunt? What kind of log sources are we going to use? What types of things are we going to look for? And it made it very specific set of things that we would hunt on, and also a very specific set of things when we would stop hunting. So like if it became known, or was getting very close to know the person that was behind a said thing, then we would have to stop and then pass that on to incident response, and they have procedures with the lawyers on how they handle that. So taking that was our offensive approach. We took that to our lawyers. It wasn't easy. It wasn't one meeting and we're done, but we got to a point where they signed off on our threat hunting, and now as threat intelligence people that hunt to find some threat intelligence in our network, our internal threat intelligence, we know what we can do without any recourse. So that was super big, super huge for us. The other one is around threat sharing, and so it was a similar situation. We were ingesting a whole bunch of stuff, getting a lot of stuff from other people, but we weren't sharing anything. We were told we couldn't share anything, and so it was the same kind of deal. We created a PowerPoint presentation, took it to the lawyers, several iterations, but we were telling them, okay, this is the type of stuff that we think is green data. So the TLP, green, amber, red, or in white. So these are what we think is white, and this is how we would share them internally and externally, what media how we would use it, and if it's red and orange. And so we laid that all out and got approval eventually. So now, as threat intelligence analysts, we know what we can share freely, hopefully without recourse, right? And so that that is how we played offense and how we got to partnership with legal. And it's it's cyclical, just like everything else. You got to keep doing it, but that's something that's very important to do when you're doing a threat intel program. Alrighty. All right, we're going to move on to technology. So this picture is just showing if you just throw a bunch of technology at TI, you can become the overwhelmed analyst or the coyote that's blown himself up trying to chase the roadrunner. So, and that's not where we want to be, because again, all these different tools on the right, firewalls and IDSs and VPNs and DLPs, you could get lost in trying to hunt all those different logs or trying to figure out how to enrich those with threat intelligence and all the different things. So you got to have a strategy around your technology. So I've often heard it said that operationalizing threat intelligence is a lot like cat herding, and I would say that that's probably pretty accurate analogy. So what we want to get to is here, where the coyote's looking real cool and calm and sleek and feeling very confident and in his abilities. And so what we did at Lilly, some of the things we did. So when we first started the program, we needed some help, right? How do we get in threat intelligence? We need somebody to feed that to us, and we didn't have a lot of threat sharing. We didn't have secrets. We didn't have companies helping us. So we did a lot of open source stuff. We did have NHISAC, so they would feed us some stuff. But we also had some government stuff. So we have the InfraGard, which is an FBI agency that you sign up for and you get information. There's also the Indiana Fusion Center, and we're members of that, and we can go out there and get information. And then there was just reading open source articles from SANS and other training organizations, or blogs from popular guys guys and gals that talk about threat intelligence that you want to hear from. So that was what it looked like initially for us. That's how we were gathering our threat intel, and it was truly externally only focused. After a while, it became, okay, we're basically getting tactical intelligence, right? Because threat intelligence is broke up into tactical, operational, and strategic. And so tactical is that low-level IOC, indicator of compromise type stuff, IP addresses. And then, to get to operational and strategic, you kind of got to move up a level. And so we thought to get there, we're never going to get there on open source, so we started looking at threat intelligence providers. So I talked about them earlier and kind of what they do for us. So thinking through, we didn't really know. Do we only need one? Do we need three? Are they all going to repeat? So we wrote some requirements around what we think we needed out of a provider, which basically for us said, hey, we're looking for operational and strategic requirements. We felt like we had tactical covered. If you guys want to throw in some tactical, okay, but we need operational and strategic. And we also wanted to proof of concept them all at the same time, or as close as we could. So we ended up doing 5 or 6 threat intel providers over the course of a month and a half or so, and really just looking at their data. And it was great. You could hear about a threat, you could punch it in all their portals and just see what they knew. And that's where we landed on. We did buy 2 threat intel providers, and that was really because one seemed very operational focused and one was very strategic, and they didn't seem to overlap a lot. And so that's where we ended up and bought 2 of those. Then you run with that for a while. So you're getting all your emails and all your stuff from your open source, and then you get all the stuff from the threat intel provider, and you, again, start to look like the coyote in the last picture, and you're like, man, I got to do something about this. So then there's this nifty thing called the TIP, Threat Intelligence Platform. And so we started looking for that, and we were like, okay, so what a TIP is going to do for you, it takes all these different threat intel feeds, it's going to put them in one spot, so you have one portal to log into, it's going to correlate them, so you see one, so if they do duplicate, they dedupe it, and then you see one article or one title, and then it will tell you all of the sources you have coming in that reported on that, which kind of gives you a level of confidence, right? So if you're looking up something and just some open source thing told you about it and none of your premium providers, confidence is a little lower. But if everybody's told you about it, it's a pretty high confidence that this is a real threat out there. So that's what we did with our TIP. And I did want to touch on that. We did the same thing. We POC'd proof of concept 2 of those side by side, and we wrote up requirements. But I wanted to touch on the requirements because a lot of times organizations are bad for make sure I get this in the right order, letting our investments, our tools, drive our requirements. And that's the wrong way to handle it. And so at least we think when it came to our TIP, we did it the right way, which we let our requirements drive our investment. So we could have went out and got maybe even a more expensive or a bigger, better TIP solution that would have had 80% of stuff we weren't ready to do in the next 2 or 3 years because we're not that mature yet. Because think I failed to mention, we're a new program as of July 2016 is when we've been doing threat intelligence, when that program came on. So we wrote requirements to be very specific to what we thought we would do in the next year or two. And so that's how we picked our tip, was based on that. So that was big for us. So we're not inundated with a whole bunch of functionality that we can't use anyways. So that's around the technology. Quickly, I was going to tell you now what we hope to do from a TI standpoint in 2018 and beyond. So we've talked about the tip, just finished up about that. And so right now, we do all I just talked about. We ingest a bunch of different feeds into it, and it dedupes it, and it correlates it, and it gives us some confidence. But what we're not doing is we're not integrated with any of our security tools. And so like our SIM, for instance, we really need to get threat intelligence data into our SIM. And so that way we can write use cases off of that, or we can just enrich the data that's already there with some threat intelligence. So that's some of our goal, is to enrich our endpoint security tools with threat intelligence data from our tip, enrich our SIM, things like that. Mentioned threat hunting. Right now that is a very manual process for us. And so we do believe there's low-level, low-hanging fruit stuff that we should be able to automate in some way or fashion. So as a part of 2018, we're going to look into threat intelligence tools or threat hunting tools that may be able to help us in that area, and so that we can help to alleviate some of those daily tasks of threat hunting that they can just do on their own and alert us when they find something. So that's something we want to do. Threat modeling. That's something we don't do any right now. Just probably just a resource concern. We probably don't have the time for that. It's a low priority. But there's some real value in threat modeling, and depending on time and questions, I have a backup slide I threw out a couple of the models to show you guys at the end. And then additional staff. So I mentioned we have four people on our team. We're all consultant level like myself. And so what we really think would help TI at some point or another is to bring in an entry-level person to maybe focus on tactical intelligence, and then let a couple people focus on strategic and operational, and kind of split the team up, where right now we're kind of one big mass. And so I think it would be a great thing, and that's part of the reason that Lilly came up today, is just to let you guys know we have a program, and you know, there's opportunities there in threat intelligence and security coming, you know, down the road. So we encourage you guys to keep us in mind. Yes, let's see. I think that is it for there. So then to just sum up, so the key takeaways around the people side. Again, sponsorship's super huge, right? Whether you're just trying to get a program in place, whether it's threat intelligence or otherwise, at a big company, you got to get your management sponsorship on board. And then I talked about beat the resource mix to death, but I really think having external and internal people in the TI team was very helpful for us. Process, it's important to have processes in place so that you can handle critical threats, and you can distinguish between how you're going to handle a threat, which isn't really an incident, right? Because we have incident processes, and we were using those initially, and that wasn't the right way to do that, because they really weren't incidents to us, but we were just trying to spin up the wheels and get everybody working quickly. So we needed a process that was similar, but yet different enough that it required its own process. So having processes in place around threat intelligence and things that are potential threats. And again, the partnership with legal, playing offense, making sure that you're in lockstep with them, and that you have some way to get approval on what you're going to do, and keep that conversation going. And then around technology, I touched on, again, you know, select a tip based on your maturity level, really let requirements drive all of your investments. And then we definitely organize our threat feeds into tactical, operational, and strategic. So that being said, that is where I would open up for some questions. And then, like I said, I do have a final slide that's got some other TI specific stuff. Because again, I know that was very process driven, but we'll go questions first.
So when you sit down and you look at a threat, and it's, you know, if it's some threats, you can take care of the normal course of business and investment. Other threats, especially strategic ones, may require some future investment. Who assigns the value of the consequence if those risks actually occur? Who weighs the risk probability and assigns a cost to the consequence? Is that something you would do, or is that a team effort with other departments as well?
So that would definitely be a direct tie-in. Great question. That would be a direct tie-in to our risk management folks. So that risk registry I touched on earlier. We want that threat intelligence driven program. So we want those bigger strategic things that aren't going to be quick fixes. Hey, go check this setting in this server and make sure we're not going to get hit by this. But this is going to take months to implement. We need to get that on a risk register, and the risk management work is going to be that for us. They're the ones that should drive that and keep that strategic level and getting it to leadership. Hey, this is where we need to invest.
So when you
Let me
refer,
just,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
I just want to add to that. And by the way, I'm Jamelia King. I'm the director of our monitoring, investigations, and response teams, which is our INR, threat intelligence, and our digital forensics team. There is an intentional effort for us to, as a collective leadership team, come together and identify what our top 10 information security risks are. And we do use a lot of the information that's a part of the risk registry to make specific strategic decisions around where our investments are going to be over the next course of, 1 to 3 years, right? So we do take into consideration that. Now, as far as associating the cost with each risk, we have not quite matured to that space yet. And as Brian mentioned, it's kind of hard sometimes to quantify it, but we do have enough external use cases that we can use to leverage and quantify some of the risk that's in place.
Okay, so that was leading into my next question, which is the risk management side. Is it one big organization in Lilly that looks at everything from hail damage to cyber threats, or do you have like a team that specializes in cyber threats and works as part of that big organization? How's that structured out?
Yeah, so the risk management I'm talking about is definitely information risk management, and so they're underneath our CISO, and they are an org. Jamelia has her section of security. There's a lead over our information risk management area. Yeah. Other questions?
As you can tell, it's an area of interest to me.
Okay, that's good.
So when you do your situational awareness of what's happening, have you had a lot of chance to look at that, or are you now pretty much just using your portal with different dashboards, if you will, to kind of give you an overview and figure out what you need to focus on short and medium term? So can you give me an example what you mean by like situational awareness versus looking at our dashboards? You have one on top? Well, you mentioned the portal, right?
Yeah.
And you mentioned that you've got different feeds, and you basically look where feeds match each other, so you don't have to read the same thing 2 or 3 times from 5 different sources.
Mm-hmm.
Is that just basically like an email? Is it a significant activity report rolling by? Do you have it depicted on the network architecture? How do you display that information so people can intuitively act on it faster if that's feasible?
Gotcha. So our threat intelligence feeds are very much only for the threat intelligence team. So there's our TIP. So we log into our TIP. We do have access to the portals of all of our different providers, right? And we can log into ISAC, we can log into InfraGard, but for the most part, wherever we can, it all goes into our TIP. So we have one place to log in. But literally that TIP has 4 users, and it's the 4 threat intelligence analysts or consultants. So they're the only 4 people that can log into it, and we're the ones that see that data. So how it gets disseminated to the rest of the organization is through all those different reporting mechanisms I talked about: Flash, RFI, weekly. Those are and we also have a weekly meeting where we stand up and talk too. I skipped over that in my notes, but so that's how that information kind of gets disseminated across the org. Well, quickly, I'll just show you this because again, as I mentioned at the front end of this, this was a presentation I gave to an industry conference, and so this was my attempt to throw up some threat intelligence type stuff to kind of give you an idea of some of the models and different things out there. There in the center is the threat intelligence lifecycle that we saw on the front, the agenda slide. So again, planning a direction, collection, processing it, analyzing it, getting the information out, and then going again, right? And it's just this constant cycle where, because threat actors change, and there's always more and more threats. So that's kind of that model. And so I've talked about threat modeling. And so there's the diamond model, which is what you're going to see in both the top, left, and right is the same thing. And there's also the kill chain. And a lot of times there's a lot of talk about, hey, do you guys use the diamond model or do you use the kill chain? And again, don't get me wrong, I said we don't really do a lot of threat modeling right now, so it's not saying we're doing this. But in my mind, the right way to do this is they're not exclusive. You do both. I mentioned the threat intelligence class we all took last year. That was definitely something we did, and as a matter of fact, they took it even farther and called it a competing hypothesis procedure, which was really complicated. But that's more like what's in the bottom left-hand corner. So you take the kill chain on the left, and then you got different adversary. I know it's very small, but those columns are all different adversaries or different scenarios going on. And then the diamond model is in each one of those. So in each one of those, you're following the diamond model. What's my capability? Who's my adversary? What's their capability? What infrastructure are they using? And who are they trying to pwn, right? And you do that diamond model in each phase of the kill chain for each actor or each adversary or each scenario in that competing hypothesis. So it's a very quick thing, but the diamond model specifically, you're looking at focusing on the top left corner, it's basically way you can read that is the adversary deploys a capability over some infrastructure you own, right, or you have, and they do that against a victim, right? So that's what the diamond model does. Adversary capability via infrastructure to affect a victim. And so that's what the diamond model is there for, is just to model these threats and say, who's my adversary, what are they using, what are their capabilities, and who are they trying to get a hold of. Where the kill chain, and the kill chain, again, it's super small, but the kill chain is reconnaissance, weaponization, delivery, exploitation, installation, command and control, and then actions on objectives. And so basically that's the kind of the life cycle of the bad guy, right? And so at first you might find them and they're just doing a vulnerability scan or an in-map against your organization. That's reconnaissance, right? They're just trying to understand what you have and where they could attack you, right? And then weaponization, that's where they're going to start creating some remote access malwares and creating viruses and worms for you so that they could do that. And then they deliver it to you, pretty self-explanatory, and then you get exploited. And then once you get exploited, a lot of times they're installing something on there so that they can maintain their presence on your network, right? And then that's where the command and control comes in, the next to last piece. And then once they have that, then they start their actions and start doing what they want to do to you. And so that's what's down, again, the left-hand side of that chart on the bottom left is the kill chain. And then the diamond models are in each one. And then each one of those columns are different adversaries or different avenues they're trying to do. Like you could say they're trying to attack port 443, and they're also trying to email phish, and they're also trying so that you could keep track of, and that's how you kind of model threats. And so this was a threat model, threat hunt thing I wanted to share with you guys, a little extra research I did to try to throw in there to provide that college knowledge over process. So. But then after that, that is literally all I have. I go back to my question slide, and then we can be done.
Back to that previous slide.
Yes, sir.
On the pyramid on the right, basically, are you categorizing how tough it is to deal with those different threats, if you will, or potential threats or capabilities?
Yes. Thank you. I totally skipped over that. That's called the pyramid of pain. Thank you for pointing that out. That's the pyramid of pain. And so, yes, what that's saying is that's how you can, how hard it is. So to try to get to the TTP level and protect against that and detect against that is super tough, right? And so as you go down, trying to figure out what tools they're going to use and stuff is challenging. Hash values, super easy to detect, super easy to block, super easy to go out and get some IOCs on that. IP addresses, also easy, right? Domain names, a little bit harder, but still pretty simple. So that's what that's representing, is how hard it is to defend against, detect against, how hard it is to go gather data on. So it's called the pyramid of pain. I'm glad you pointed that out. I was like totally right past it. So. Anything else?
Okay, if there's nothing else, let's thank Brian and his team for coming up here tonight.
Thanks, guys.